Can you really trust good people? What if I told you that the Metamorphosis by Kafka reveals a dark truth about human nature that no one wants to admit? Get ready to uncover how fear, shame, and anger can turn even the strongest bonds into ruins. Let's explore why, when put to the test, those who seem kind might be the first to abandon you. This video might completely change the way you see society, family, and even yourself. Stick around, because what you're about to learn could open your eyes for good. Gregor Samsa's transformation in the Metamorphosis serves as Kafka's central metaphor for the dehumanization inherent in human relationships. Gregor's physical change into something unrecognizable as human triggers a cascade of reactions, revealing how much appearance and utility shape the way people are treated. Before his metamorphosis, Gregor was a hard-working individual who sacrificed his own desires to support his family. While he was emotionally invisible, he still held a position of respect due to his usefulness. The moment he becomes an insect, that recognition vanishes, exposing the fragility of bonds based on appearances and utility. Gregor's dehumanization begins with his own family, the people who should have been his sanctuary. At first, there's a hesitant attempt to cope with the transformation. His mother tries to deny the monstrosity of the situation, while his sister, Greta, offers some basic care. Over time, however, the grotesque nature of Gregor's new form makes his presence unbearable. He's no longer seen as a son or brother, but as a creature, a burden to be hidden away and ultimately eliminated. This mirrors a common human reaction to otherness. Fear and disgust lead to distance and a denial of the other's humanity. The dehumanization isn't limited to the physical. Despite his outward transformation, Gregor retains his human consciousness. He continues to understand the world around him, recognizing his family's growing disdain and internalizing their rejection. Kafka shows that dehumanization extends beyond appearance. It's an emotional and psychological act. Gregor's isolation, inability to communicate, and loss of dignity reduce him to something less than human, even though his mind remains intact. Kafka also highlights that dehumanization is a two-way street. As the family rejects Gregor, they themselves become less human in their morality. The father acts violently, the sister abandons all care or compassion, and the mother succumbs to indifference. Gregor's transformation isn't just the story of an individual losing his humanity in the eyes of others. It's also an account of how the ability to dehumanize someone exposes the ethical flaws and limits of those around him. The impact of fear and anger in the Metamorphosis is one of the central drivers of the conflict between Gregor Samsa and his family. Kafka portrays fear as an almost instinctive initial reaction to Gregor's transformation. However, rather than being overcome or understood, this fear evolves into anger, a destructive emotion that dehumanizes both those who feel it and those subjected to it. This transition illustrates how unchecked negative emotions can lead to cruelty, eroding familial and moral bonds. Immediately following Gregor's transformation, his family's response is dominated by shock and terror. Fear emerges as a visceral reaction to the unknown and the strange. Although Gregor remains the same person internally, his external transformation renders him unrecognizable, creating an insurmountable barrier for those around him. His father, in particular, reacts aggressively from the start, attacking Gregor physically, not just as an expression of repulsion, but as an attempt to regain control over a situation that completely eludes his understanding. This initial fear, however, does not dissipate with time. Instead of attempting to understand Gregor's condition or offer compassion, the family chooses self-preservation, distancing themselves both emotionally and physically. As time passes, fear morphs into irritation and eventually into anger. Gregor is increasingly seen as an obstacle preventing the family from living normally. They no longer perceive him as a son or brother, but as a threat to their domestic stability. Anger emerges as a response to the helplessness and frustration the situation causes, with violence, both physical and emotional, becoming the channel for those feelings. The father's behavior is emblematic of how fear transforms into anger. He attacks Gregor by hurling apples at him, inflicting severe injuries that contribute to Gregor's physical and emotional decline. The mother, on the other hand, retreats into denial and emotional collapse, unable to confront the reality of her son's transformation. Greta, who initially shows care for Gregor, quickly becomes overwhelmed by the burden of responsibility. Her empathy erodes, and she ultimately succumbs to anger as well, declaring that the family must rid themselves of Gregor to restore normalcy. Each family member, in their own way, allows their initial fear to harden into contempt and rage, making reconciliation or genuine empathy impossible. The loss of identity and purpose in the metamorphosis is one of the most devastating consequences of Gregor Samsa's transformation. Before his metamorphosis, Gregor was defined almost entirely by his role within the family. As the breadwinner, he was responsible for financially supporting his parents and sister, a duty that shaped his sense of self and how others perceived him. Despite the relationship being imbalanced and exploitative, Gregor worked a job he despised solely to pay off his family's debts. He still found a sense of meaning in his utility. This role provided him with a degree of dignity and belonging, even if it was neither celebrated nor genuinely appreciated. Gregor's physical transformation, however, immediately robs him of his ability to work. He can no longer leave the house, nor can he communicate effectively. As his grotesque appearance isolates him, he also loses any emotional connection with his family. Stripped of his role as provider, Gregor begins to realize that his identity was inextricably tied to what he did, not who he was. The family, which once depended on him, now sees him only as a burden. This radical shift in dynamics reveals the transactional nature of their relationships, built on utility rather than genuine affection or respect. This loss of purpose profoundly affects Gregor's emotional state. Once a central figure in the family's functioning, he becomes invisible, a creature confined to a dark room and treated as an unwanted presence. The awareness of his family's rejection only deepens his suffering. Without his work and the ability to provide, Gregor realizes he holds no value to the people who mattered most to him. This realization is a crushing blow to his psyche, causing him to retreat further into himself until his existence becomes a mere shadow of what it once was. Gregor's room, where he is confined, serves as a symbol of his exclusion from the world and his gradual loss of identity. Over time, the space deteriorates, accumulating filth and becoming a physical reflection of the emotional neglect he experiences. A particularly poignant moment occurs when his sister removes the furniture from his room, ostensibly to give him more space to move. This act is deeply symbolic. By taking away the objects that connected him to his former life, she erases the last remnants of who he was. Without these ties to his past, Gregor becomes entirely alienated from his former identity. Kafka uses Gregor's plight to explore how human identity is often tied to the social roles we fulfill. When those roles are lost, whether through a grotesque transformation like Gregor's, illness, unemployment, or any other circumstance that strips us of perceived utility, the resulting sense of emptiness can be overwhelming. For Gregor, this loss is not only practical, but existential. He doesn't just cease to be useful, he ceases to be recognized as human. Shame in the metamorphosis is a destructive force that permeates the narrative, profoundly affecting both Gregor Samsa and his family. From the moment of his grotesque transformation, Gregor feels deep shame about his new condition. an emotion that drives him to hide and avoid direct contact with his family. He recognizes his repulsive appearance and internalizes the disgust others show, believing his isolation is necessary to shield his family from the embarrassment and pain his presence causes. This shame not only distances him from others, but also destroys what little remains of his self-esteem and dignity. Gregor's shame manifests physically and emotionally. He minimizes his presence by hiding under furniture or behind doors to avoid being seen. He comes to view his existence as a burden or failure, something to be concealed or ignored. Even when he feels hunger or the need for interaction, he hesitates to seek attention, fearing the reproachful gaze of his family. This behavior illustrates how shame can lead to self-sabotage and isolation, preventing any effort toward reconciliation or resolution. On the other hand, Gregor's family is equally consumed by shame. Their embarrassment over Gregor's condition extends beyond physical repulsion. His transformed state represents something deeply humiliating, a secret that must be hidden from the outside world. The family avoids openly addressing the situation and attempts to carry on as though Gregor doesn't exist. When visitors or household staff are present, Gregor is carefully concealed, reinforcing the idea that he is a shameful anomaly best swept out of sight. This collective shame wreaks havoc on the family's relationships. Instead of coming together to face Gregor's transformation, they distance themselves from him and from each other. The mother, who initially tries to show some compassion, soon succumbs to her own shame, breaking down in tears and refusing to confront reality. Grete, Gregor's sister, who at first hesitantly cares for him, becomes increasingly frustrated, blaming him for the family's deteriorating dynamic. The father channels his shame into aggression, attacking Gregor and further cementing his exclusion. The weight of shame spreads throughout the household, unraveling the family and deepening the tragedy. Kafka uses shame as a powerful metaphor to explore how societal norms and the fear of judgment can become oppressive forces. Shame not only isolates Gregor, but also prevents his family from offering him support or understanding. Each character is consumed by the need to hide the anomaly Gregor represents, ultimately leading to his symbolic and literal death. Gregor dies not just from neglect, but because he completely absorbs the shame of being who he is. The critique of society and conformity in the Metamorphosis is one of the most striking aspects of Kafka's work, woven into the events surrounding Gregor Samsa and the reactions of his family and society to his transformation. The story exposes how rigid social structures and suffocating expectations can dehumanize individuals, forcing them into predetermined roles and punishing them harshly when they fail to meet these demands. Even before his transformation, Gregor was already a victim of this oppressive logic. He worked tirelessly as a traveling salesman to support his family and pay off his father's debts, sacrificing his own happiness and freedom in the name of obligations he never truly questioned. His identity was entirely defined by his utility. Trapped in a state of constant exhaustion and dissatisfaction, Gregor had no room for dreams or personal desires. This reality underscores Kafka's critique of an alienating work system that reduces individuals to mere economic tools, valued only for their productivity. When Gregor transforms into an insect, his uselessness to both society and his family becomes apparent, and he is swiftly discarded. This rejection mirrors a societal system that values individuals only as long as they conform to norms and fulfill functional roles. Unable to work or interact in an acceptable way, Gregor is treated as a problem to be hidden and ignored. His exclusion from family life symbolizes how society marginalizes and erases those who cannot or will not conform. Conformity also governs the behavior of the Samsa family. After Gregor's transformation, their rejection is driven not only by fear or disgust, but also by his challenge to the social order they are desperate to uphold. The father, mother, and Greta are consumed by the need to re-establish a sense of normalcy, even if it means ignoring or eliminating Gregor. They fear external judgment and feel ashamed of his condition, reflecting the social pressure to conceal anything deemed abnormal or inappropriate. This dynamic reaches its peak when Greta, who initially shows some care for Gregor, declares that he must disappear for the family to get their life back. Her statement is not just a personal rejection, but a reflection of the collective desire to rid themselves of anything that threatens conformity. Gregor, with his existence outside societal norms, becomes a symbol of systemic failure, and his death is seen as necessary to restore order. Kafka uses Gregor's story to critique how society prioritizes adherence to norms over individuality and compassion. Gregor's transformation highlights the oppressive power of conformity, which suffocates both those who fail to adapt and those who strive to maintain appearances. In their pursuit of conformity, the Samsa family sacrifices not only Gregor, but also their own humanity, becoming cold, calculating, and devoid of empathy. The Metamorphosis is a timeless work that delves into universal themes of transformation, dehumanization, and the fragility of human relationships. Kafka exposes how fear, shame, and societal norms can destroy both individuals and families, illustrating the complexity and often cruelty of human nature. The trust in good people, as the title suggests, is challenged as kindness is revealed to be conditional and fragile. Gregor's family, initially appearing loving, succumbs to the pressures of shame and disgust, abandoning him when he needs their support the most. Kafka's work serves as a stark warning against blindly trusting in human goodness, showing that, in extreme situations, people's true character is laid bare. If the Metamorphosis opened your eyes to hidden truths about human nature and made you reflect on how we perceive the other, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel now for more content like this that pushes you to think beyond the obvious. Leave a like if this video resonated with you and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And don't forget to check out the amazing videos popping up on your screen right now. They'll deepen your understanding of literature, psychology, and the mysteries of society. See you in the next video.